All right, we are going to be working on our shapes 1. This is an example of what we are going for. We want 3 different shapes that are translucent or see-through so that you can create 7 different colors. So we are going to open up Photoshop. And we are going to create a new document. The name of this document will be Shapes 1. The width is going to be 8.5 inches. The height will be 11 inches. The resolution 300. Color mode is going to be RGB. The background contents are going to be white. We are going to hit create. All right, so we've got our blank piece of paper. Up in the top, we've got some options. Underneath it, we technically have our options panel here. We have our toolbar on the left-hand side. We have our color swatches over here. You can do swatches or you can do the spectrum. We have our adjustments panel, and at the bottom, we have our layers panel here. This is where we're going to be changing our opacity to make our shapes translucent. So we need to start with our shapes tool. So it's about 3/4 of the way down, and it should look like a little rectangle. So if you hover over it, it should say rectangle tool. The shortcut for the rectangle tool is the letter U on your keyboard, and it draws a rectangle. If you right click on there, you have other options such as a rounded rectangle, an ellipse, or a polygon tool. I would say any of these 4 would be good for this first Shapes 1 assignment. So I'm going to go with a rectangle. My fill color is going to come from up here in my options panel. So let's say I pick a yellow for my fill color. And I am going to draw my rectangle. So that is my shape 1. You can see that it automatically made its own layer here, rectangle 1. It is yellow. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make another shape. Let's say I want to do a circle, an ellipse. So I'm going to draw that before I change the fill color because right now it's still filling my rectangle. So I'm going to draw this. Let's pretend that I want this to be a perfect circle. Right now it's kind of an oval. If I hold Shift on my keyboard, it keeps that circle proportional and it makes it a perfect circle. So there we go. There's my circle. I'm now going to change my fill color. And I'm going to change my fill color. I'm going to come over here to my little spectrum here. And then I can pick almost any color in the rainbow. I'm going to go with kind of like a teal cyan blue color. Let's say that I want to move this circle. This isn't exactly where I want it to be. I can click on my move tool and I have my ellipse here selected, so I can go ahead and move that wherever I want to on my piece of paper. And before I make my third shape, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my opacity so that I can start seeing a color change in between my yellow and my cyan. So right here in the top of the layers panel, you've got your opacity. I'm going to just lower that scale. And I've already got a lime green color as my third color. And I just need to make a third shape. So I'm going to do a polygon. And up here in my options panel, if I change that side number to 3, I've got a triangle for my polygon. And there's my triangle. I am now going to change my fill color to like a magenta. There we go. And so this placement is pretty good to overlap my circle, but it's only overlapping my rectangle a tiny, tiny bit. So I'm going to actually move this so I've got more overlap going on. And I can now change my opacity to see through to the other colors. So now just by these 3 color choices, I chose these colors on purpose because they're going to make some dynamic shifting colors underneath. So I've got like a lime green, a purple, kind of a darker purple, and like an orangey color. That's why I chose yellow, cyan, and magenta. Okay, we can go a little bit further with this. Let's say that I want to place this right in the center. I've got about 1 inch at the top and about 3 inches at the bottom. So I want to move this down a little bit, but I want to move them as a grouping because I like the way this looks. So I can hold Shift And I can select all 3 of those layers so that they're all light gray. And I can go ahead and move this wherever I want on the canvas. Let's say that this is a little bit too big for my liking. I want to make these shapes a little bit smaller. But again, I like this as a grouping. I can hit Control T on my keyboard. And if I want to keep this proportional, I can hold Shift and I can make this smaller. I can hit Enter on my keyboard to accept that size. This should be pretty good for my Shapes 1, so I'm going to go ahead and save it. We're going to go to File, Save As. This is where if you didn't already name your file, I'm going to have you name it now, Shapes 1. The Save As type is going to be Photoshop, and you want to make sure that we are saving in My folder. So yours should look something kind of similar. Make this a little bit smaller. Yours is going to look kind of similar to this. So you're going to scroll down to find My folder. You're going to scroll to find your name in this folder. And then you are going to double click your computer graphics folder that you just made. And you are going to save this in My folder. If you get a pop-up that comes up, you can check the Don't Show Again and just X out of the pop-up. And this is a successful Shapes 1. Okay, so we're going to make a new file. So we're going to go to File and New. This file we are going to name Shapes 2. The width and the height is going to be 8.5 inches by 11 inches, just like what we did for Shapes 1. Resolution 300, color mode RGB, background contents white. Everything's the same as before. And this is the one that we're going to be using your custom shapes for. So go back down to your Shapes tool. And if you right click on it, the last option is this little GAC looking thing that says Custom Shape Tool. You're going to click on your Custom Shape Tool. Up in your Options panel, all the way over to the side, it's going to say Shape. And most of you should have a little arrow there. So next to the arrow, there's that little like down arrow that it says click to open Custom Shape Picker. You're going to click on that arrow. And you probably only have about 15 shapes. I'm going to show you how to get more of them. So you're going to come over here to the right to this little gear. Click on the gear. And halfway down, you're going to go to All. And you're going to click OK. And it's going to add those shapes. So your view might look like this. So all I did is I just took that bottom right-hand corner and I just expanded it so that I like to see all of my options. So these here are all of your custom shapes that you guys can use. So for my example, I just started with the square tool. You don't have to do this, but this is how I'm going to do mine. And I'm going to do my fill color. So I started with, kind of like a deep blue for the top. So I did, a few squares of color to get kind of my sky going. I'm going to just draw another one. I'm going to kind of overlap them and just change those fill colors as I go. And then I started doing some squares that were more of like a brown color, kind of like maybe a sand. And I just kind of layered these up just to give myself some sort of start to a scene. So right now I have 5 shapes. I have shape 1, which is my navy blue, and then they keep going down. So your stacking order, this is kind of important. So whatever's at the bottom of your layers panel is the bottommost shape. Whatever's at the top is your topmost shape. That makes sense, right? So technically my shape 5 is on top of everything else here. Okay, now that I've kind of got like a background going on, I can go back to my custom shapes tool and I can come up to my options panel and I can pick a different shape. Like maybe now I'm going to start doing my trees back there, so I can find a tree. Where is a tree that I want to work with? Or maybe I want to do some flowers. I'll start with my people. So I'm going to put my people here, just like with shapes 1. If I want these to be proportional, if I hold shift while I make them, it's going to keep them a proportional size. And then I'm going to change my fill color. I just maybe want these people to be almost like a silhouette. So I've filled them in with a black. And now I'm going to, maybe I'm going to make some grasses in the front. So I'll just take some of these and I'm going to make these like a dark green. And maybe I'm just going to make a bunch of these and just kind of change that green color a little bit as I go. So this will be good for you guys to kind of practice like the order. So let's pretend that I want that dark green one on top of this light green one. All I have to do is take that shape. So it's shape 7, and I know that because when I click on it, it gives me that blue outline around that shape, and I can click on it and I can drag it and drop it, and then it goes on top of it. So I'll zoom in here so you guys can see that a little bit better. So let's pretend that I want this shape on the right-hand side all the way on the top. So I can click on it. And if that blue isn't coming up, another way that I can tell what shape I'm working on is that eyeball tool next to it. If I click on it, it hides that shape temporarily. So I know, okay, shape 8 is this lime green leaf. And I can move that and I can change the stacking order. Okay, so we've got some kind of foliage there. So I'm doing way more than 6 shapes. 6 is the minimum, but you obviously can do more than 6 shapes. And then maybe I want to put, maybe they're going to be holding an umbrella. So here's the umbrella. I'm going to move that because it's not even touching those people. Let's also pretend that I want to switch the handle. So this handle is kind of going, it's going to the left. It creates the letter J. I want to flip it so the handle looks like it's going the opposite direction. So to flip something, you can go to Edit, Transform, and flip horizontally. So see how that handle changed and now it's going the opposite direction. Now this is a little too small. It's not even covering her head. So I'm going to have to make my umbrella bigger. I can do Control T and I can make this umbrella. I'm just actually going to make it taller and then hit enter to keep that size. And I want her umbrella to be a different color, and it's already got rid of my fill color. So if I go back to my tool, my shapes tool, I can pick that fill color and make it a red umbrella. So right now I technically have 10 shapes total. And for me, I think, you know, this is pretty good for my custom scene. I'm going to go ahead and save it. If you guys are still working, keep working. But I'm going to save mine just so that it's on my Screencastify video here. So I'm going to go up to File, Save As, make sure that my file name is Shapes2. I'm going to make sure that my Save As type is Photoshop. And this is in my computer graphics folder, Katie Feyereisen. And you can see the other things that I've already saved in this folder. And I'm going to change this to our 1B and save. And there we go. This is our shapes to create a custom scene using at least 6 different shapes. So this right here at the bottom is an example of the Shapes 3 composition. So using shapes to create an abstract composition using layering, opacity, and style options / the FX. So Shapes 3 is really the opposite of what we've been doing with Shapes 2. This is going to be something that does not look like a scene. You maybe want to use some of the tools that are kind of more not so recognizable, I would say. So in Photoshop, we are going to start just like we started the other two. We're going to go to File and New. The name for this one is going to be Shapes 3. The width is going to be 8.5 inches. The height is 11. Resolution 300. Color mode RGB, background contents white, and create. And I'm still going to use my custom shapes tool that I've been using for the scene shapes too. But instead of using those really recognizable shapes, maybe I'm going to use some of these that are more kind of design based. So let's say I'm going to start with kind of like a background. So I'm just taking these little like stick things. I'm going to make mine really big just because I like to take up the whole composition. So I've got these little sticks, let's say. I kind of like them yellow. I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to do another set of them. I'm going to do 2 of them. I kind of drew this way too far in the left-hand side. Without undoing my mouse, if I hold the space bar, I can actually move this shape without committing to it yet. So I've got a second set. Maybe this set, I'm going to lower the opacity. And I think all this yellow might be too much. So maybe I'm going to change this to a green instead. There we go. So I've got all these little like sticks maybe for my background. I can change my stacking order. So right now you can see that the green is on top of the yellow. But what happens if I put shape 1 on top of shape 2? You can see that now the yellow is on top of the green. So just like before, you can play with the stacking order. Let's say I really don't like this background color. You are allowed to change that. So right now it's defaulted to white. If I click on that background and I right click on the gradient tool here, it's about halfway down in the tools panel, I can switch to the paint bucket. And the paint bucket color is going to come from the bottom of my toolbox. And I can click on that and I can pick any color that I want for a background color. And I can click and I can create a background color. So you don't have to be working with white. And that color is really ugly. I'm going to change it. It's still really ugly. I don't know what I'm thinking with my color choices today. I've done this assignment too many times. That's a little bit better. That's more fun. And I'm just going to kind of keep playing with some of these shapes. We'll do this one. And then another fun thing you can do are your style options or your effects. So right now I've kind of got this kind of circle shape that's got pointed edges. So with that selected at the bottom of your layers panel, you can't see it on the big overhead because that effects tool is being blocked by the tray for the markers. But if you're looking at the TV, you can see it. It's right down here. It's called FX. If I click that, I have all of these options that I can do to this pointy circle shape. So maybe I want to do an inner shadow. Okay, so I've got an inner shadow here. This is all of the settings for my inner shadow. And it came up and it's really, really light. The reason it's really light is my opacity is at 35%. What happens if I bump that up? You can see that it's starting to get a little bit darker inside that shape. What if I change the distance? There we go. Now it's really showing up. See that? What if I change the size of it? So there's all these settings that you guys can kind of play with. What if I change the choke? What if I change the color? Maybe I don't want it to be black. Maybe I want it to be like a gray color instead. So I can do all of this in my layer style setting. So right now I'm working with my inner shadow. See how it's checked and how it's light gray? That means that I am working with those inner shadow settings. I can change the angle of that. Let's say I want to do a stroke around this shape too. With this open, I can then go up to stroke. And now I've got a little outline around this shape in black. Let me up my opacity. See how I've got a black outline around there? I can make it bigger. I can make it smaller. I can change the position of it. Maybe I want it on the outside of the shape or the inside of the shape or the center of the shape. There's all different settings that you guys can play with. Again, maybe I don't like that color. Maybe I want to make that a dark blue instead, or a light gray. You can change the color of that stroke. So that's literally a shape with two effects to it, and it's already kind of made it more dynamic. So go ahead and play around with these shapes, play around with the effects. You're not going to really know what these do until you experiment with them. So that's the really cool thing about Photoshop, especially in the beginning when you're first kind of using it, is you can experiment with lots of different things without really like committing to making something that needs to look dynamic. Okay, here's a great example. I just made this shape and it's not showing up. It's because it's underneath all of these layers. So I need to move it all the way to the top, and it's the same color as my background. So I need to change that so that I can see that shape. Okay, and then maybe I want to do some effects to this shape. Maybe I want to do a drop shadow to it. So this brings up my drop shadow options. It's not very noticeable right now. That's probably because my color is light gray. Let me change it to black and up my opacity. Now you can see that shadow. I can change the distance of it, the angle of that shadow. Oh, it does actually affect the inner shadow too. If I change the angle, just know that. Okay, I can also, maybe I want to do a outer glow. So I've got a maroon outer glow. I can change that color. So I think you guys have noticed you can change a lot of these settings. You just have to figure out where they are and how they work. And maybe I want to lower this opacity of this shape so it's not so sticky outy. Maybe to do the same thing for this one. And you can kind of play with the different layers. Again, stacking order, maybe I want my shape 1 to be on top of my shape 3. Maybe I want my shape 1 to be on top of everything. I can change that stacking order to make that possible. So same thing as before, after you finish up shapes 3, this is supposed to be an unrecognizable thing. It could just look like a pretty design. Does not have to look like a scene. And I can go ahead and save this the same way. Shapes 3, Photoshop, make sure I'm saving in my computer graphics folder. And that is shapes 3, create an abstract composition using the style options and effects.